So the word on the grapevine is that an announcement will be made next week regarding Conor Benn's next opponent. There are two names being mentioned at this point, and they are the former WBO light welterweight champion Maurice Hooker and former unified welterweight champion Keith Thurman. Now, anyone who's been paying attention will know that these two in particular have been connected to a potential fight for Conor Benn for a little while now, and I've gone on record to say that I'm happy with either of these fights to happen. I think, like many, however, the better fight is a Thurman fight. Not only from an entertainment perspective, but also if you look at it from the perspective of Benn's development and picking fights for him that are going to get him ready to fight the next level of opposition at welterweight. If you compare Keith Thurman and Maurice Hooker, Keith Thurman has always been a bit more revered than Maurice Hooker. They're obviously in different weight classes, but most people would be confident in Keith Thurman becoming a champion, retaining his titles, maybe even going on to be the best in his division, where Maurice Hooker, nobody really saw that from him or had high expectations from him. I think Maurice Hooker was always an underrated fighter, but I think he did lack some tenacity, especially in the face of adversity. You know, if you turned up the heat on Hooker, he'd kind of fold maybe, at least mentally. But also he didn't have the greatest chin either. His punch resistance was a little bit suspect. But he did have some good skills. And I think potentially he could still provide some challenges for Benn if that fight goes ahead. But for the most part, I think the Thurman fight is just a better fight all round. And if Benn was to beat Thurman, I think that'd be a good win. That'd be a good bit of momentum and a good acid test for Conor Benn at this point. So yeah, if you ask me, the Thurman fight's a better one. There had been some rumours, however, coming from certain boxing personalities, quite a few whispers for a while now actually, that Chris Eubank Jr. was actually going to be next for Conor Benn. But these rumours have essentially been shut down by Benn himself and Eddie Hearn. There was an interview on IFL TV from Saturday at the Pulev Chisora 2 show where Benn and Eddie Hearn were interviewed by Kugan Cassius. It's just a short interview, it's like 2 minutes long. So I'll leave it a link in the description in case you want to check it out. And yeah, they basically said, you know, that fight will always be an option, but right now it's just not one we're going for. And I think that's a smart move, to be honest. Like, I understand the appeal for that fight. You know, it's a showdown between the sons of two boxing legends who had their own rivalry, and it's a historic rivalry. But right now, I think it's just a silly fight to propose for quite a few reasons, actually. A couple of the main reasons being, we don't even know how good Conor Benn truly is in his own division. You know, he's never fought for a title at welterweight, much less won one. He hasn't even done that. And he's expected to go up and fight Chris Eubank Jr., who's 2 weight classes north of where he is now. Yeah, I think it's just silly. You know, if Conor Benn was undisputed welterweight champion and he'd beaten everyone, beaten all the top guys, and he proved he was really something special in his own weight class, yeah, why not? Why not go and fight Chris Eubank Jr.? But Benn hasn't done that yet. We don't even know if he's the best prospect. So I think there's a lot for Benn to prove before he should even consider a fight with Chris Eubank Jr. I think right now it is a bit of like a gimmick kind of pipe dream fight. And not just to put it all on Conor Benn. If you look at Chris Eubank Jr. as well, if in the grand scheme of his career, has really not done that much. He's fought for a world title, once against George Groves, and he lost that fight, and he lost it handily. You know, he made it rough and tough, and it was certainly, I think Groves had to weather a storm at a couple of points, but for the most part, he was handily beaten by Groves. And obviously that was at super middleweight, but at middleweight, he's been beaten by Billy Joe Saunders. Who can you say is a truly world-class name in their prime that Chris Eubank Jr. has beaten? I can't think of any names off the top of my head. And you know, people say Chris Eubank Jr. is a champion because he won the IBO and the interim WBA. And look, I'm never going to win those titles, so I'm not poo-pooing those completely. But if we're looking at the grand scheme of world championship fights, I'm sorry, but those don't count. They don't count. Who regards the interim WBA belt as a legitimate title? Nobody, other than Chris Eubank Jr. Same with the IBO. As Hatman always says, the IBO now is the equivalent of the WBO back in the 90s. You know, you can go back and watch old fight telecasts from fights in the 90s, and they always kind of make some backhand comments about the WBO belt. It wasn't a legitimate title. It had to kind of evolve and earn its way into being recognised as a legitimate title. And the WBO the IBO is in that same position. But anyway, enough about the titles. Yeah, through and through right now, I think the Chris Eubank Jr. fight for Conor Benn is silly for both of them in reality. Many people, however, have asked me what I think of Conor Benn and his future, where he is at welterweight. And to put it short, I think Benn has enough talent and ability to make it to fights with the top guys. You know, he gets into that mix. I think he does at welterweight. But you notice how I say I think he has the ability to get to those fights. I don't necessarily think he wins those fights, because I've long said that Benn is undersized for the division, and he really is. He's a small guy. And even though he does have skill, like he's certainly developing his IQ and his technique, he's not just going up against big guys. He's going up against guys who are massive for welterweight, and they have elite level skills. So it's not like Conor Benn is super skilled and he's just a little bit on the small side. You know, he's going up against guys who can match him and probably even surpass him for skill. Actually, I don't even think it's probable. I think it is actual. I think that is the case. So yeah, he's going to be up against it when he reaches that elite level. You know, Terence Crawford, Errol Spence, those guys are seen as the 1 and 2. And you know, I guess there's the potential that they move up to 154 pounds, which I suppose it'd make it a bit easier for Conor Benn. But even then, he's still got the other young guys coming up. He's still got Ennis and Virgil Ortiz. Those are tough fights for Conor Benn. I don't think, if you ask me who's the best out of the three, I don't think I can say Conor Benn. I'd say that. I think he's probably third out of those three. Even your Dennis Ugas, I'm sure he'd be looking to stay in the kind of championship mix. And who knows, maybe if the belts get vacated and they call for Conor Benn and your Dennis Ugas to fight in for the vacant title, one of the vacant titles, you know, just as a hypothetical scenario, I'm not even sure Benn wins that fight. So it's a tough ask for Conor Benn. So all he can do, though, is not listen to people like me and develop as best he can. And I think a Keith Thurman fight is a good fight for him to have next to ensure that development. So that is just my opinion on the potential next fight for Conor Benn, and also just touching on his future in the division. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you agree, disagree? Leave it down there and I'll get back to you.